Good morning, everyone. As been said, I'm Giles Wilson. I work for Ericsson. I'm head of technology for TV solutions at Ericsson. And I'm going to speak a little bit today about multi-screen TV. I'm sure a few of you might have seen the odd presentation on this topic over the last 12 months, but hopefully I can find a few insights that you may not have come across before. As a technology person, I will start with a very complicated technology diagram. This is basically a traditional TV delivery solution broken down into its components. It has normally a set of dedicated targeted devices which are based on whatever kind of network you're using. It's a mobile phone for a mobile TV solution, or it's a set-top box for a satellite TV solution, and so on. It has a delivery infrastructure, which is the network and all the head-end processing, transcoding, a service platform, and so on, and so on. And this is really where pretty much all of us in the business started out 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it might have been a satellite platform or an IP&TV platform. And then we had the demand to move to multi-screen, and the first step in that was a mad rush to get out there, and we built this problem. The first step towards multi-screen, which is to take that infrastructure and replicate it in multiple silos to deliver across multiple networks to constrained devices. And then we try to blend the user experience by having similar branding and having similar content. And a lot of us are still stuck in this position and looking for where do we have to move to with multi-screen, what do we need to do, and what do these solutions to enable multi-screen need to look like as we move forward? Now, for us, the first thing you do when you look at that problem is to look at, well, what is it that will actually appeal to the consumers? What is it I'm trying to achieve? You may or may not be aware, Ericsson has a consumer labs organization where every year we go out around the world to talk to consumers about what they want from their services and what they want for their devices. So I'm going to give you a little glimpse at some of the results we had from our 2012, where we looked in quite a lot of detail, actually, at what people around the globe wanted from multi-screen services, how they expected to use their devices, what they were willing to pay for, and so on. The real overarching conclusion from the research that we did was this. People have moved away from thinking about IP&TV and satellite TV and mobile TV. They've moved away from thinking about devices, and for them, it really is about the experience. It's not about the functionality, it's about the overall experience that's built around consuming video content. We looked very detailed within that then, and how they wanted to experience the content with different devices. And we targeted 3 specific devices. The first one's very obvious, which is tablets, iPads or Android pads, and really how people wanted to use those in conjunction with their services. We looked at phones, we're Ericsson, and we looked at connected TVs as well. In terms of the tablet, we got a lot of results you would expect. Here we have 6 different roles that people saw using tablets for. Not just about delivering video to the tablet, but using it as a remote control for the service, remotely controlling their DVR, social aspects, games consoles, and content discovery, and really using that device for doing things which are not easy to do on a set-top box and a TV screen. Slightly different when we looked at the phones. The phones have some negatives. We had 5 roles that people wanted to use them from. They had some negatives compared to tablets because of the processing capabilities that they have, and also because of simply the size of the screen. However, there's one key advantage, especially in an IP&TV system, for blending in phones for a lot of these functions. We've always had this aspiration within IP&TV to use the fact that it's predominantly a unicast user experience to really personalize the experience for the user. The problem is that we could never convince anybody to log on to their TV, and we have multiple people in every household. One of the unique qualities of the phone is it is a personal device. As soon as someone starts controlling the TV service with their phone, you know who it is in that household who's actually controlling and watching the TV at that point in time. So both of these devices, these first two devices, people really wanted to use as part of their viewing overall experience, but not necessarily to actually view the video, to interact with the service. The third one, we got surprising results, and that was connected TVs. We found a lot of the consumers we studied had connected TVs. We also found that they'd actually connected them, which is good. And we identified 10, in this case, potential roles for the connected TV within the multi-screen experience. So it should be something which can be a key part of that overall experience. But we found that most of these identified roles were not yet either being addressed or being addressed successfully. And in fact, even more than that, what we found in the research was that the whole connected TV experience was failing for the users that we interviewed. And the reason of that is, again, going back, it's about the experience. People are now used to an internet experience which maybe 10 years ago was click and wait, but now it's very dynamic, it's very interactive, and it's very high quality. It's efficient, it's a good user experience, and they weren't finding that from the application TV or connected TV-based solutions. They were finding this instead, that it was too slow, that it didn't achieve what they wanted, and really they were moving on to use add-on solutions instead of the connected TV. They weren't bringing internet into their TV. They were using internet very much at the same time as their TV, but they were pushing it out onto dedicated devices. And that comes in two flavors. In some cases, that was for accessing over-the-top services to access them blended in with the TV service through the set-top box, or in a dedicated unit, which gave a better user experience, or it was using a companion device. The scenario of people sat on the sofa using either a phone, a smartphone, a laptop, or a pad to access internet at the same time as watching TV was very clear. And that, not only that, but that's how they wanted to operate. They wanted to use the two devices at the same time, and they did not want to put their Facebook page necessarily up on the screen, but they wanted to be interacting with Facebook. And that did lead us down the route of looking more heavily at the social aspect, because we saw this. Greater than 40% of the users that we surveyed were interacting socially via the internet at the same time as watching TV. That's Facebook, it's Twitter, and messaging, all of those kinds of service. But they weren't just doing it at the same time, they were doing it around the content. And it was having an impact on how they perceived the value of the content and how they perceived the value of the service as well. So moving on and actually digging into that a little bit further and looking at, well, how does it enhance the content? What kind of content does it work for? Which type of video service does that work for? Firstly, we looked at on-demand versus live. And what we found was that both social aspects are important for both of these types of services, but in very different ways. Perhaps unsurprisingly, for live and broadcast, the live broadcasts were actually triggering social interaction. And the starting point for that then is the content. So it's when the game comes on, it's when the episode of American Idol starts, once it started, that was actually triggering people to go and start interacting with each other on the social networks. That doesn't work for on-demand because not everyone's watching the same on-demand at the same time. But there was no less social interaction. It just wasn't happening during the content. It was happening before and after the content. So social interaction was actually, in that case, driving people to pieces of content. It was personal recommendations. It was feedback after it was watched. So you've got, on one side, a start from the content driving social interaction, and on the other side, social interaction actually driving people towards specific pieces of content. And then you start to ask yourself the questions of, with the amount of content we have, is search and discovery, is a guide really the way to actually launch the TV experience and drive the zapping behavior? In a lot of respects, it's not actually what's driving it right now. It's this. Moving on from that, looking at where the value is, people did find that the social interaction, the discussion around the content enhanced the experience. It's never going to take lousy content and make it into extremely good content, but it'll take lousy to mediocre and certainly take reasonable content to good. And that was a very clear signal from across the globe. 25% of consumers are more likely to pay for the TV content if they watch it in a social setting. We also looked then at specific genres of content and what worked with social and what didn't. And, very much related to the live on-demand thing, and perhaps not surprising, for live social interaction, it was sports events, it was reality shows, Idol. For the content less suitable for live social interaction was, TV series, movies, etc. But again, it was driving social interaction. It's just not live social interaction. This graph actually is one of a number. If you go onto Ericsson.com, you'll be able to download the full report. But I've studiously tried to leave out as many of these eye charts as possible in the presentation, but I did want to put this one up. What this shows is the analysis of viewing habits and what people were actually accessing. And it compares in the green our survey from 2010 and the orange our survey from 2011. The reason I wanted to put the slide up was actually the middle bullet point on the left. We actually saw a 5-point drop in the use of PVRs. People weren't using PVRs as much to record live content. That was a pretty big surprise for us. We were predicting in the report that there would be a continued move from live TV, apart from sports events, etc., and by appointment viewing, and across onto on-demand. When we investigated the reason for this, what we found was it was the social behavior. People are so connected so much of the time, they can't get away from it. It's not just that they're going to it, it comes to them. There is no way to get through all of Sunday away from the TV and not find out who won the Australian Grand Prix or who won the soccer match. And because of that social impact and that connectivity impact, people were actually going back to live TV and away from using PVR. So that's a very clear and visible numerical quantitative impact of social TV on how people are using their devices and their TV services. This is a warning, though. Based on how much feedback we were getting on this, we decided to prototype an idea and flip it out there for people to comment on. And that was the idea that, when you pull up your program guide, effectively, as well as the programs that were on, you got an indicator saying what your friends and your family, what they were watching at that point in time. And we got a massive variation In the US, this was apparently the best idea that we had ever had. And in Germany, they thought we were completely nuts. And it's because they behave differently, their internet usage is different. You know, you have to be a little bit careful. You can't jump too far with your consumers. You need to look at your local population and what they're actually doing. I had another case very similar to this recently. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to one of the world's major cable operators, and under intense pressure from a local IP&TV provider, which a much better user experience, their marketing department had decided they absolutely had to replace their UIs and get something new out. And at great expense, they developed a new UI. They pushed it out to all their set-top boxes, and they sat back and waited for the praise from their customers. But what actually happened was they were inundated in their call center with phone calls of people demanding that they switch back because they liked it the way it was. And there's a lesson to be learned there, and you can see that lesson being learned on the internet with people like Facebook. You know, Facebook, I guess we got a few Facebook users here. So Facebook recently released their new timeline version of their profile. It's one of many updates they've made. But you don't get it by default. You have to opt into it. If you don't want to change, you don't. You need to have a lot of flexibility in your solution to be able to adapt. So, moving away from the earlier slides, what do we actually see then Advanced Multiscreen to be? It's about delivering video experience and other connected services, including communication services and social aspects, to multiple devices. It's about delivering over multiple networks as well. It's about being able to reach those devices across the fixed, the mobile, and over the top, so you reach your users everywhere. But it's also about tearing apart the information streams that run across those networks. Associated content, metadata, i.e. the guide or the VOD catalog, the actual video itself, and the control plane, because they may want to use all of those things in different ways on different devices at the same time. They may want to watch the video on their TV screen through their set-top box over the fixed network while controlling it with their mobile device on the mobile network. They need to be broken apart. It's about moving away from those vertical silos with dedicated devices to dedicated networks into this matrix, a matrix of devices and services and networks. So in order to do that, we move on from this to something that looks more like this. One common unified infrastructure that allows you to understand the business logic of content, what your users want, to deliver the same services, but to all those devices and across all those networks. So this is where we see the future of the back end of the video platform, the TV platform. There are some challenges in getting from A to B, as always. But this is how we see it in the future. And when you look at that, actually, and I started off by saying I'm a technical guy, right? When you look at that and you compare that to the big internet platforms, it's very similar. There's a lot we can learn about how things are done in the internet and bring that to our TV systems. And it's particularly around that flexibility. Flexibility to give users what they want, flexibility to continuously change. We've heard people already today talk about, you know, what are the devices going to be 2 years from now, and what are the services going to be 2 years from now. 5 years ago, we weren't predicting that, you know, Twitter would be a big impact on our TV service. You know, a lot of flexibility and a lot of ability to have a rapid velocity of service deployment. So with that, I'll leave with just a summary of those final conclusions. What is the future of multi-screen? It's a blend of services delivered to multiple devices on multiple networks around the content, not just the content. We're very much at the beginning of the multi-screen journey. We're definitely not the end, and there probably isn't an end because the devices and the services and the expectations will change over time. And because of that, you need flexible, open, and unified infrastructure if you're going to be long-term successful in delivering multi-screen TV. And with that, I will finish. Thank you for your attention.
Giles, thank you very much.